Hello and welcome to SketchUp. In this particular video, we would be discussing about the icons of the status bar. Status bar is just below the command line. Over here you can see that this white box is called the command line, and below this you can see the status bar. Over here there are several icons. If you have different icons than what I have displayed here, I would just recommend you go to these three lines over here. Over here it's called customization. If you click on this, you can see that there are various items that are checked over here. For example, model space, grid, snap mode, dynamic input, ortho mode, polar tracking, isometric drafting, object snap tracking, 2D object snap, line weight, selection cycling, annotation visibility, auto scale, annotation scale, workspace switching, annotation monitor, isolate objects, and clean screen. So presently I have the icons for these commands over here in my status bar, and I'm going to discuss most of these commands. So if by chance you don't have any of these switched on, I would recommend you that you switch these on. The first thing we're going to be discussing is basically the grid mode. If you see over here in AutoCAD window, it's a collection of various minor lines and major lines. Major lines are basically these bright thick lines, and minor lines are these sort of dim and thin lines over here. So if you zoom out, the grid resizes itself, and if you zoom in, it again resizes itself. So there would be a point where the grid won't resize anymore. So that's the point. You can see that you have a certain grid spacing. So to change the grid spacing, you can just use, you can click on this arrow over here and go to snap settings. So under the snap and grid column, you can see that we have the grid on, and the shortcut for that is F7. So over here you can see the grid spacing is set as 10 by 10. That means that the intersection between any 2 points in a grid is basically 10 units, and there's a major line every 5 minor lines. So that means that 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So fifth would be a major line. I'd recommend having these settings to 10, 10 and 5 only, because it kind of reminds me of the graph that we used when we were kids, that paper graph. So it will be easier for you to use this grid according to that. Then there is the adaptive grid, display grid beyond limits, and follow dynamic UCS. So I'm not going to go deep into these things, but I'm just going to tell you that it tells us how the grid behaves. For example, if I zoom out, the grid readjusts itself. If you put this display grid beyond limits, it's going to put this off. Adaptive grid is also going to, it limits the density of the grid when zoomed out. So these settings are basically while we zoom in and zoom out of the grid. So I'm not going to get into details of this because this does not come in for beginners. I'm just going to tell you that you can have these settings to adaptive grid as on and display grid beyond limits as also on. So I'm just going to click on OK over here. I will just attempt to draw a line over here. For example, if I just enter the line command, you can see how effortlessly and how smoothly my pointer moves around the workspace. But over here, if I use the second icon, which is the snap mode, if I choose this to be on, and the icon moves the same way. Apparently, if the settings for you are different, it's going to just move on the intersection of these lines. I'm going to tell you how it's different for me. I'm just going to go to the snap settings over here and put the grid snap to normal, and I'm just going to click OK. This is how your cursor would have been moving if it was in the normal mode. So this basically helps us to draw objects in details. For example, if I want to draw something like this would be a perfectly 90-degree triangle, isometric triangle, perfect 90-degree isosceles triangle, with two sides to be as equal as they could be. So I just drew this without any units, but I know that these two units, this would be 20 and this would also be 20, because this whole thing is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. I mean, it's not 20, I'm sorry, it would be 100. So because this particular major line is 50 and this another line is 50, and the distance between two of them is 10. So I would recommend having this on, because it helps us to draw detailed drawings with very precisely. But if you think it's getting a bit too much, for example, my cursor only moves on these intersections, and kind of becomes irritating at times, because we always don't want to work in these intersections. But it would be good if you can just refer them when you want to. So for that, I'm just going to click on the down arrow and go to the snap settings again. Over here you can see the polar snap. Polar snap is basically it helps us to it assists us in drawing at intersections, but it doesn't restrict us to it. So if I just click on OK and I attempt to draw a line, you can see it's snapping at these intersections over here, but it's not limiting us to them. So it's it's snapping at every 10 units. Over here also, in whatever direction we go, it's snapping us at every 10 units. Not particularly at the intersections, but it's snapping us at every 10 units, because if we go to the snap settings, we have the snap spacing as 10 and snap my spacing as also 10. So if I just go to grid snap, you can change the spacing over here and you can just select OK. So that's how basically the grid snap works. The second is dynamic input. Basically when we enter any command, for example I enter a line, and you can see over here presently it's showing me 80 units, over here it's showing me 80.662. so that gives me an idea of how long this line is without entering the actual units for them. That is basically the dynamic input. If I choose this to if I choose to put this off, this just disappears. I have no idea of how long I'm drawing in a line, how long this line is going to be. Obviously I can just enter the units. For example, if I just enter 60 units, this line is going to be exactly 60. I can just prove it to you by using the distance. So this is basically 60. So that's how the dynamic input works. I would recommend having this to be on, and I'm putting the snap mode off presently. The next is the ortho mode. Ortho mode is basically a tool that helps us draw orthogonally. That means that we will be able to draw lines only vertically and horizontally. If I, for example, if I just put this to on and I attempt to draw a line over here, you can see no matter how my cursor moves, the line appears only to be either vertical or horizontal. So this is a very useful tool when you're making orthogonal drawings and your drawings composes a lot of vertical and horizontal lines. We don't have to think while making a line or anything, because it automatically snaps it to be horizontal or vertical. So if I want to draw a vertical line of say 100 units, so I just click anywhere on the screen and I just extend it and type 100. So it's going to type a vertical 100 line. If I put this off and then I attempt to draw a vertical line, it's going to take me some time to realign it and make an exact vertical line. So that's going to take time. So basically I would recommend having this ortho mode on if you're making a drawing with a lot of horizontal and vertical compositions. The second over here is polar tracking. So if you don't want to be limited to just horizontal and vertical drawings, but you want help, you want something, you just want to have a reference of horizontal and vertical, you can have the polar tracking on. So if I have the polar tracking on and I attempt to draw a line over here, you see this dotted line is coming over here. It's basically snapping me to the angles that I have already set. The angles presently set are 90 degree, 45 degrees, 0 degrees, 135 degrees, 180 degrees. So basically the variance, the multiples of 45 degrees, it's snapping to the multiples of 45 degrees. So you can change these angles by just clicking over this little arrow over here. Presently I have 45, 90, 135, 180 selected. You can have 90, 180, or you can go lower down the grid, or you can also introduce your own custom angles over here. For example, I have it 45 presently. I can just change this value to whatever I want. So this is going to help you draw your drawings at certain angles. Though I would recommend you not to go a little too low, like 5 degrees, because it's going to create a mess and your line would be snapping every 5 degrees. It's going to be difficult to draw rather than to be easy. So I would recommend you not going to 5, 10 or 15. I guess 30, 60, 90, 45, 90 is absolutely fine. The third thing over here is called the isometric drafting. If you are an architecture student, you must have heard about the isometric drawings that we draw. So if you select this to be on, you see how our x and y axis they change. If you click this little arrow in beside this isometric drafting, you can see there are basically three kinds of isoplanes: isoplane left, isoplane top, isoplane right. So if I use isoplane top, it's going to look something like this. So it basically represents the various angles in which you are going to draw. It helps us draw the isometric drawings at quite an ease. So for this, I'm just going to have the grid mode on. So I'm going to have something like this. I just drew a rectangle over here, and I'm going to attempt to draw a cuboid without measuring each and every line. There we have an isometric drawing of a cuboid with this length to be approximately 50 and this length to be approximately 30. So, and the height to be approximately, you can adjust the heights and whatever you want according to your own self. So this I think is maybe 20. So you can choose the isometric drawing. You can choose to draw the isometric drawing the way you want to by using the different isoplanes. For example, left isoplane, right isoplane, or the top isoplane that I mostly use. So for now, I'm just going to put this to off, and I'm just going to erase this. So isometric drawings are made in AutoCAD using the isoplane settings. I hope you understood. The next we have over here is snapping reference lines. That means that if I draw any line, for example, I just put this grid mode to off. For example, if I draw any line and I want to draw a line horizontally to this particular line, it's helping me do that because it's helping me to draw towards the center also. So these lines that are appearing over here, these dotted lines, they are appearing because of snapping reference lines. These are basically reference lines that I used. You can just use this particular line and you can draw however you want. It's basically creates reference lines and reference points for you to work around your drawing. If you have this particular thing to off and then you attempt to draw from the center, so no line is appearing over here. So that basically helps us create reference lines. I'm going to recommend to have this on because it helps us a lot. The third thing that we have here is the object snap. if I click this little arrow over here, you can see the different modes in the object snap. We have endpoint, midpoint, center, intersection, extension, perpendicular, nearest. So these are the basically points that help us create reference points. For example, endpoints and midpoints. You remember how I just how a triangular shaped point just appeared when I just hovered my mouse over this line over here. So that was object snap working to pinpoint the midpoint. Center is used for basically circles, ellipses, and arcs. Intersection is used for the intersection of arcs or lines and arcs, etc. Extension is similarly used to extend arcs or lines or polylines. Perpendicular is used to make perpendicular lines to any line. For example, if I have a slanted line and I want to make a perpendicular out of it, so this basically snaps the line to a perpendicular angle. The nearest helps me if I hover my mouse near any line, so it's just going to if I click near to any line, it's just automatically going to start my line or any command from onto the line. So the nearest command is that. There are different type of commands over here. For example, geometric center, node, quadrant, intersection, tangent, apparent intersection, parallel. You can also explore more options by choosing the object snap settings over here. So there are different settings over here, you can select them, but I would recommend you not to select all of them because it's just going to make a mess in your drawing, because most of these points, they are going to overlap with each other and it'll just confuse you. So I would recommend having only those object snap modes on which you actually use. So I'm just going to select OK for that. Now we have discussed till here. The next we have is show or hide line weight. For example, if I just select this line and go to the home panel and change my line weight to say 0.90, the line still appears to be the same and no changes have appeared because we have the line weight to off. If I just click this icon and move it to on, you see it's showing me the line weight. Although even if I don't have this thing on in the print, it's still going to show the line weights, so don't worry. Even if you don't have the line weight command on, all the line weights, they're going to be appearing exactly as you want them to in the print. The next over here is selection cycling. I'm just going to draw another line over this line and show you what selection cycling is. Over here, if I want to select this longer line by clicking over here, it's not getting selected. So if I just put the selection cycling to on and I try to click this, so it's showing me an option of selecting which line selecting a line of which line do I want to select. So selection cycling is basically useful when you have too many overlapping objects, and it helps you select or edit those particular objects that you want. So it tells you an option of which all objects are presently at this particular point that you are selecting. So selection cycling is pretty useful then. The third we have over here is the annotation objects, as we just discussed in the previous video of what annotations are. I'm just going to show you an example. Let me just change this text to annotative and edit my annotative text from here. I'm just going to select on modify, and the text size is set as 2.5. The symbols and arrow size is set to 2.5. I guess that is okay, and I'll just close this. Let me just make a rectangle so that I can show you the different annotative objects over here. Suppose I draw the dimension for this. to 1:1. This particular dimensions, this particular annotations, I'm inserting at a scale of 1:1. If I change the scale to say 1:20 and then I attempt to insert my dimension lines, I guess this is appearing a bit too big, so I'm just going to change the scale to 10:1 and attempt to draw this again. I guess this is appearing to be a bit too small. Let me just draw it to a scale of 2:1. Yep, this should do. So we have presently two annotative scales over here. One is on the scale of 1:1 and one is on the scale of 2:1. So if I just have my 1:1 scale on and I show and I put this to off, you see I can only see the annotative objects. I can only see the dimensions that were made using the scale 1:1. Alternatively, if I choose to scale to 2:1, I can only see the dimensions that were made using the scale 2:1. So if I just select this to on, I can see all my annotative objects appear over here. But if I just choose it to be say 2:1 and I select to add scales to annotative objects when annotation scales changes, so I put this on, and if I zoom in over here, and I attempt to change the scale to 1:1, you can see all my annotation objects, they are appearing on a scale of 1:1. So this is basically an override to show annotation objects. In this, I'm going to see all the dimensions in that particular scale, whichever I select. For 2:1, it's going to change all my annotations to the scale 2:1. So that's how it works. But if I just put this show annotation scales to back to on, and then I change my scale to 1:1 and I try and select this, you can see that there are two annotation scales that are appearing over here. If I just go to the quick properties of this, you can see the annotative scale as 1:1, and if I click this small icon over here, you can see on the object scale list, it is showing that there are two scales for this particular annotation. So I hope you understood what these different annotative scales they mean. I'm just going to delete this for now. Third thing that we have here is basically the isolate objects option. Suppose I have many objects. I'm just going to create a lot of rectangles. And circles. If I select this particular circle and I click on this and I choose to isolate my circle, that means everything except for whatever my selection is, it's just going to disappear, and I can focus solely on this particular circle. Alternatively, if I choose to hide my circle, just press Ctrl+Z and make all the items appear. Alternatively, if I select this circle and I click on hide objects, it is going to do opposite of what isolation does. Hide objects is going to hide that particular selection, and we can focus on the other objects that we are working on. For this, we don't have to put these objects into layers. We can just use isolate and hide to work on different objects. If you want to view all of your objects and just unisolate everything, you can just choose to end object isolation, and your whole drawing is going to appear right before your eyes. The next is a clear screen. If you click on this, it's just going to disappear everything that's appearing, the taskbar, the status bar, the top, everything is going to disappear, and only your workspace and your status bar with the command line is going to appear. So this is what the clear screen does. I hope you understood most of the icons of the status bar, and thank you for watching. Keep practicing.